Hello and welcome everybody. Today I'm going to be doing a video speaking about the states of New York and California and why those two states should be broken up, dissolved into smaller states, or just split into two separate states each, as to provide better representation for the less represented groups within the state in different regions that also hold different cultural values. Now, if you're new, just before I get into this, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel if you want to see more content similar to this in the future. Okay, so starting off, we have California, the state of California. We'll go through them. As we can see here in the 2020 election results, 6 million people voted for Trump, 11 for Biden. 6 million people is still a very large voting group, one of the largest in the country. I believe probably the largest group of Republicans voting in one state. But because of the way California is and how big, overall their representation and their votes mean next to nothing, especially in a region like the Jefferson type region of the state up here, where it is the state of Jefferson, a proposed state that would take some of the southern parts of Oregon as well as these more northern parts of California. As you can see here as well, these regions of Oregon are very, very conservative, but overall their representation leads to next to nothing because of this region of the state itself. Even in the recall election, we saw the same trends in the more northern part of the state and even a bit around here. But overall, their representation is non existent because of how big the state is and the metro areas of San Fran, LA, and San Diego taking up most of the population in the state, preventing them from having any representation whatsoever. It's just not fair, it's not realistic, and it doesn't work. It's not the way the state should work. So I'd say realistically, I'd propose that the state should be broken up. There should be a state of Jefferson, which is about a populace of around 3 to 4 million, which would give them somewhere around 6 electoral votes. As well, you can see it would take a bit out of this and take some electoral votes away from the state of California and Oregon, therefore better representing the peoples and their cultural values, their values in general within the region. It's a very rural, more farming, small town area, especially in southern Oregon, northern New York, California as a whole, while the rest of the state is a lot more metropolitan. It's very trendy, liberal. It's just not fair to put them together into one group. They don't get the proper representation. And this isn't just the case in a state like California. This would also swing elections quite drastically. But if we look at New York, we can see the upper part of New York itself is fairly conservative and Republican. But as you go down and you see the main metro area of the state, for the most part, which makes up a very large portion of the state's population, ultimately controls the entire results within the state. 60% for Biden, 38% for Trump. Now, if we break this state up, there's better representation for the more rural type conservative voters, the more farming communities, these small town voters that don't get that proper representation. And this way we would prevent people from being forced to emigrate from states, move to other more conservative states that might actually hold their values, where their vote actually matters. You can see this, the overall population density within the more northern parts of the state is not very high. It's a very sparsely populated compared to the metropolitan area of Manhattan, New York, the entire area. As well as you can see, as of 2020, the population of New York State was 20,200,000, with 14 million of them living in the metro area of the state, right here. So that means the other 6 million living up here have next to no representation whatsoever. Their votes, their values, none of it matters because of the way the state is formed. It's not fair. It's leaving this part of the state behind. Its infrastructure and its economy is much less developed, and it's struggling because their values and their part of the region is not properly represented, like the southern part of the state down in Manhattan. So if we look at the 2020 election map, we assume a state, 6 million right here, similar to like the state of Arizona, around 6 million. That would be 11 electoral votes, and I'd say it'd be pretty close, assuming we break the map up about here, giving the entire northern part its own land, and then keeping this as its own separate state, New York City state. This would be Upper New York or something like that. You break it up, You give this 11 electoral college votes would then transfer over to Republicans, giving them more representation. Now, I obviously can't do that on this map, but again, assuming just based on the 2020 election alone, we give better representation to this region overall. That's 11 more electoral college votes. That's 246 right there for Republicans, better representing them. Also, helping the Republican Party base as a whole be better represented. And it also helps, even in the southern part of the state, better represent their values, what they need, because these regions are not the same. They can't have the same government running them because they don't have the same needs. And the same thing is here in Oregon and California. You take about 2 electoral college votes off and probably about 6 off of here, and you give that about 8 in this region here. That would go to Republicans, 8, 19. You add 19 overall. So yes, this wouldn't necessarily sway an election, but like say 19, assuming Pennsylvania, it wouldn't sway the election entirely, but it would make some elections potentially closer. It would better provide representation for these people in these different states, and it would be just a more fair system overall. It's not fair to have people in these regions here who believe and have completely different values, different cultures, economies, everything, have to be forced to be represented by all of the elites in this section and this section of the state, completely canceling out their votes, and whatever they believe doesn't matter as a result. Again, same in New York. The entire upper part of the state doesn't matter because 14 million people live here, 6 million live here. So therefore, they control the overall vote. Now, this could be done in the breaking up of states, or we could do something similar in its proportional district-based system that we have in Maine and Nebraska. Either way, it would generally allow for better representation of each of these regions. For example, you could do the congressional split up here, allowing for the regions to vote more based on what their values are, and then allow the at-large regions go to the winners of the state like they do, again, in Maine or Nebraska. Now, that wouldn't, again, this isn't just about, swaying election results. No, this is just about better representation, better proportional shares of the votes to different people in different regions. It is a more fair system, and overall likely would help the country in these regions better develop and to work out as better regions in general. Now, if they're their own states, they can have their own elected officials that will be more in tune, in connected to their needs. They know what they need. They're more of that region. It's not these elites down here in New York, Manhattan, that control everything and then leave this part of the state behind. It's just not a fair system. That's why I propose either these states be split up, or their at least voting systems are split differently, allowing for better proportional representation of the people in the states. Anyways, that's the video for now. If you guys agree with my takes, or if you have any thoughts or opinions related to the state of New York and California, or any other state that could potentially implement similar systems, let me know down below in the comments. Subscribe if you are new as well, and consider leaving a like on this video. I post daily videos, so if you like that, you want to see more like this, again, consider subscribing. Anyways, that's all for now. Have a good night.